Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Claire Wasserman here, founder and author of Ladies Get Paid. We are an educational platform, book, and global community that is all about helping women level up professionally and financially. As many of you have heard me say before, I'm kind of obsessed with the idea of power. And I know that looks like different things to different folks, but I think at the end of the day, we all want freedom to choose, freedom to leave a job if we need to, freedom to follow a path that feels intrinsic to us. And at the end of the day, that does, I think, come down to what's in our bank accounts or not in our bank accounts. So that's why we're so passionate here about building financial foundations with you all. And then again, career, building the life that we love. And today I'm so excited to have a very special guest, Bonnie Low-Kramen, who I'm going to let her introduce herself. I always find it a bit kind of odd when somebody recites my own bio back to me. But let me just frame the conversation a bit for you. Right before I do that, for those who are watching live, this video is also going to be on YouTube. But if you're watching live, I want you to really take advantage of the fact that we are all connected here. So please use the chat. Tell us where you're from. Drop your LinkedIn if you want. Use this as an opportunity to network with each other. And yes, there were questions that were submitted beforehand, which I'll pull from, but ask in real time. So if you hear something that sparks a question, or maybe you have an experience that resonates and you can share your own advice. I mean, again, the fact that we have folks from all over probably the world here together. I mean, this is one, I guess, good thing about going virtual. Mm-hmm. And there was a question earlier that asked about the app that I had mentioned. It's called Camo. So yes. So Bonnie, I want you to just introduce yourself real quick. I mean, you're one of the world's most respected advocates for women in the administrative position. So you can talk about your work, your career sort of before you started doing what you do now. But I'd love you to take it away, and then we'll jump into the conversation around the real reasons that people quit and what we can do to get them to stay.
Well, Claire, thank you so much for having me. It's a real thrill and an honor. I was hearing about you for a long time, and then to have so many familiar friends on this call tonight is really very heartwarming for me. I'm a Jersey girl and a Rutgers grad. I thought I was going to be an actress. And that lasted for 3 months. I went to work for the actress Olympia Dukakis, helping her to run her theater in Northern New Jersey, the whole theater. And my story is, first of all, nothing about my career was planned, nothing. And the absolute truth is that my very first job out of college was in a theater box office, making $4 an hour. And I know I'm dating myself. And then when I got a promotion, they promoted me to $4.50 an hour. So, when I help coach women now, it is so much drawn on my own personal experience. And much of what I know about negotiating money comes from having a front row seat watching Olympia Dukakis negotiate for her salaries over the years, over 25 years. I took the job as the PR director for Olympia Dukakis at her theater 10 months before she shot the movie Moonstruck, which is the movie that she won the Academy Award for. And I suspect that everyone in this room can relate to those moments in your life where you make a decision that doesn't seem like it's going to be so big, and yet it changes everything. And that decision changed my entire life. In a million years, I never thought that the work would last 25 years. In a million years, I never thought that teaching and speaking about being a great assistant and negotiating the money that you deserve would take me to 14 countries and 38 states. I never imagined that, but here we are. And now here I am at this moment with you. In February, I gave a TEDx talk, which I was asked to do, and that's called The Real Reasons People Quit. And that was a real trip of an experience. And now I'm working on my second book, which is a real labor of love. It's called Staff Matters. And in it, you can be sure that I talk about the ways in which money is so important an aspect in everyone's life, but especially in the lives of women.
Yeah. And I mean, today's focus is riffing off of this quote, great resignation that we've all been hearing
Yeah.
about and experiencing. And I am curious for those who are watching in the chat, tell us if you are among those quitting their jobs. And if so, why? Is it because you didn't want to stay where you were and you found something better? Or you were okay where you were, but you know what, you wanted to run your own business. So I'd love to hear kind of personal stories. But for you, what I mean, you've seen a lot, being in an administrative, being an assistant, being behind the scenes. Um, in this great resignation, right, where millions of people are quitting their jobs, does any of it surprise you, based on your own experiences?
No, it doesn't surprise me at all. And in fact, the very first sentence of the TEDx talk is, I saw this great resignation in motion long before March of 2020. It's just that women felt more stuck. But they were looking, they may have been at their desks, but they were certainly looking to get out because toxic environments, environments where they were underpaid were prevalent. And in every workshop I gave, in every conference where I spoke, these themes came up where women have been struggling for a long time with the issues of being the primary caregiver for children, perhaps being a single parent and feeling trapped. And that's why one of the many messages that resonates with me about you, Claire, is you talk about freedom. And that's what women want, is the freedom to call the shot. I want everybody to be the CEO of You Incorporated. My goal is for you to take control of your own lives and your own careers. And so when the pandemic hit and the great resignation started, there was absolutely nothing surprising about it to me.
Out of curiosity, I mean, you didn't quit, right? For 25 years, you worked for the same person. So what kept you there? And then, by the way, for everybody watching, we're going to go into very tangible, whether you're in a position of management where you can, change the environment for other folks, or if you're maybe in a situation where you want to see management change, how can you manage up? How can you advocate up? But yeah, why did you stay? And did you ever consider
Retention gives a very big story. Olympia saw me as a partner. She gave me a seat at the table. I had a voice in her life. She gave me very few boundaries that essentially she said to me, Bonnie, I won't always do what you say, and I may not always agree with you, but I always want to know what you think. And that, as a leader, telling that to their assistant, that was like being a racehorse and having the gates flown open, because I got to run. I got to buy houses in 2 countries. I got to flex my leadership muscles in ways that I never thought I would. When I told Olympia that I was being asked to be the president of New York Celebrity Assistants, her attitude was not, oh man, that's going to take a lot of time away from me, Bonnie. No, her attitude, I'll never forget it. She said, you do it. You have to do it. This is going to be so great for you. And I said, well, it's probably going to be great for you too. And it turned out to be pretty great for her. But she said, no, this is not about me. This is about you. I want you to grow. I want you to learn. And that, my friends, that was the key to staying for 25 years. Like, there was no reason for me to leave. Olympia was, I was able to negotiate more money every year. Looking back, I wish it had been more. I wish I'd had the gumption to negotiate more, but mainly she gave me the freedom to be me and to stretch with every year. It didn't get boring or dull. No 2 days were ever the same. And I think those are the common denominators for people who stay in their job versus the ones who leave, because I was respected and valued in that role.
Were there any times that you did need to speak up for yourself or for something that you were passionate about or felt needed to happen?
Yeah. And because Olympia was a very strong personality with big opinions, and sometimes there weren't that many times when she would go into the land of the irrational and unreasonable. It's not easy to do that. A flight that wasn't possible at that time, or a meeting that wasn't able to be handled at or happen at that particular week. At certain levels, Olympia had a hard time being told no. And the best assistants out there, Olympia would say, if you tell me no, I want you to find ways to tell me yes. If you tell me no, I'll believe you, but I want to know how it can happen. So that's how I learned over the years. So she was a perfectionist and she was tough. There's no getting around that. So there were times I had to assert.
Yeah, but that there's a balance, or that you can have two things at once, meaning you can be demanding, on speaking on her behalf, being, a perfectionist or demanding, but at the same time be open to hearing. And that would be good, I think, for everybody here who's maybe in a position of management, where how do you both be strong and assertive and clear, and with high expectations, but also be open to discussion and for things to change. One thing I want to go into your TED Talk here. So you talk about the top 4 things that staff needs to do to stay. So if you can go into each one of those, and then specifically both for somebody who is in a position where they can make change pretty quickly because they are in management, and then thinking about if you're not, how can you advocate up? But yeah, so starting with those 4 things, I think that would be a transition.
My premise was the idea that there are the real reasons people are quitting. What I see all over the world is that there are things that are going unsaid in the workplace, issues around workplace bullying and sexual harassment and not being paid properly and being disrespected. So that what I have observed, and this is my experience, this is if in 14 countries, this is what I believe to be true, is that the number one thing that staff wants in order to stay is respect, is to feel respected, that they are seen and heard. As those examples that I gave you with Olympia shared, that you have a voice, you have a seat at the table, and that you were hired for a reason, and that those reasons are acknowledged over time. And respect is very broad. You can see it in very simple but meaningful ways. Simple things like saying please and thank you, and pronouncing your name right, and remembering your birthday. Those things are respectful and they mean so much. The second thing is to belong, is to feel a sense of belonging and in a community, in the culture of a company. You're hired for a reason, and that certainly that belonging is tied to respect, but to belong means that you are a key part of the whole, and that it's the opposite of being a dime a dozen and easily replaceable. No, that if you, Nicola, on this call, if you can't be there at the meeting on Wednesday, well, we're going to have to reschedule because you're that important to the project. That's belonging and feeling that you are valued as such, that there's an important role that you play. The third thing that staff wants is to be fairly compensated. There are far too many women who are underpaid in this workplace, and there's a whole school of thought, we're not trained to negotiate. And however, there are too many leaders who are taking advantage of the fact that women are not asking for more money and are not more proactive about negotiating. So I make that a huge part of my training, but that is the third reason. It is not number one, definitely not. Money is not the most important thing. The fourth most important thing that staff needs to stay is a career path, is a runway for growth, is our leaders who will invest in training, who support you to learn and grow, not unlike what Olympia did when she said, you have to be president of that organization. When I went to write a book, she was like, please just don't say any terrible things about me. And of course, she read the whole thing before it ever went, and there was absolutely no need to say anything bad. But she supported me to keep stretching and growing, and that's what is needed in this workplace. So those are the top four things that staff needs.
I'm realizing we didn't really go into the work actually that you do to help other people who are in the assistant community, because let's actually back up and talk about that work, because it's not just what you saw when you were working for
Right.
also now in the development, the career development that you're doing, because understanding this respect, the belonging, the fair compensation and career growth, what you're seeing, the roadblocks to that, right? Are on which ones people are really struggling with the most. So let's actually have you talk a little bit now about the work that you're doing in the assistant community. And then I have some more questions based off of that.
Well, for 25 years ago, I became one of the co-founders of New York Celebrity Assistants. So that was a wonderful training ground to understand what was going on in that niche of celebrity assistants, of which I was one. But during my time with Olympia, I wrote a book called Be the Ultimate Assistant, and that led to all of these invitations for speaking engagements, et cetera. I created a class. I was so aware, Claire, of the lack of resources for this ginormous group known as assistants. There are 10 million administrative professionals in the United States. That's a big number. And I went to the bookstore to try to find a book to do this work better. I literally found next to nothing. And I stood there in Barnes and Noble and said, I think I have to write the damn thing myself. And that's what I did. And then I went looking around for a class thinking because here's the thing, I wanted to be as great an assistant as Olympia was an actress. How is that going to happen without training? I mean, it just kind of made sense to me. And I didn't find it, so I created that also. And that class is called Be the Ultimate Assistant. So this year in 2022, this is our 11th year. I say our, Vicki Evans teaches it with me, and she teaches technology, because anyone who's an assistant here knows there is actually any professional, there's no succeeding in the workplace today without being proficient in technology. You just need it from Zoom to Microsoft Office. You just need to know tech. And so that's part of our workshop. And in addition to that, I go into companies and do presentations, not only for assistants, but for assistants and leaders together, which is, I call that building the ultimate partnership. That is a passion of mine, to bring these two groups together, which makes so much sense. And it's done so rarely, but now I'm doing it more and more.
What have you learned in the interactions that you're having when you bring those two groups together? Because we're ostensibly talking about folks who have a lot of power, right? Whether they're a celebrity or not, I mean, they've got influence. What's the dynamic you've seen there?
Amazing dynamics.
Okay.
What I'm aware of is that leaders, I'm so glad you asked me that, because everyone on this call can use this, I believe. Leaders become aware that they're not only responsible for delivering content to share content with the people they work with, but they need to give context. They need to give the why of what we're doing, so that the people who work around them understand the big picture. And for some reason, there are leaders out there who believe that they haven't needed to give the context and give an understanding about, why do you need that early morning flight? Why do you want to bring those particular people together? It's useful for us all to have context. The other piece is, and I share this on the TEDx talk, it is painfully true that leaders lack education in how to manage people, that any given leader could be a really talented lawyer, but that does not equate with being a talented manager of people. Those are not equal skill sets. They're different skill sets. And the data shows that the average age that a leader gets their very first training in managing people is age 46. When I learned that, it was a mind-blowing experience because that explained so much. So the leaders in this room, when we get them together, essentially I'm giving them a crash course in how to manage a team and work with your assistant as opposed to having an assistant work for you. That's what Olympia would say, that Bonnie works with me. She doesn't work for me. She works with us. Those words really matter. So in these rooms, Claire, leaders become aware of how much they rely on their assistant and how much they should rely on their assistant. I had a hilarious virtual meeting in February where with the leader on the call, I was so grateful that he was so vulnerable because he actually shared with this group of 500 people. He said, you know, early in my career, I was a micromanager and I was chasing away assistants left and right. He said, until finally I got an assistant who trained me. And I decided that the way to manage an assistant is to get out of the way, is to just let her go or him and get out of the way. I'm like, everybody on the call was just delighted that he could be that honest, because that's what we want them to do. Everyone in the workplace gets 24 hours in a day. And the question becomes, what are you doing with that time? So a leader, an executive, a CEO, whoever is leading a company needs to do the things that they are uniquely qualified to do and that only they should do. And that the people around them should be allowed to do their job too. You know, that sounds simple, but somehow it's a new idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, for everybody here, I'm glad to see there's some conversation happening in the chat. I'd love to know if more folks are in positions of, where they would be managing up, or if there's somebody, in a position of leadership or of influence where it'll be a little bit, quote, more easy to change culture. But going back to like these four things, right? The respect, belonging, fair compensation, and career growth. If you are somebody who needs to manage up, right? Say you're not getting these things, and where do you begin? So maybe starting with the respect, right? That being the foundation for everything. I don't know if you have tangible tips that you could give for somebody who needs to have a conversation. And assuming that it is not a toxic environment, right? This is not assuming they need necessarily to go to HR or to leave. This is a situation, maybe communication can be adjusted.
Absolutely. There's never a bad time to visit the relationship, and there's never a bad time for a conversation to recalibrate. And you know what? On the heels of this pandemic, it's a great time to have kind of a refresh, a fresh look at your job description. And I advise that to everyone, is to begin with your job description and to have that in writing, where you have in black and white your responsibilities and the amount of time it's taking you to do those responsibilities, because and you could do it in an annual review, or if it's not time for an annual review, on the heels of this pandemic, it's a great time to say, well, there have been a lot of changes in the world and our workplace, and I'd like to have a conversation about the way we're working together and some ideas I have about how we could do it better. And the place to begin is with the job description in writing, because then you can remind executives, like, this is what you're actually doing. And it is possible that you're seeing areas that you would like to venture into, and to say, I had a couple of ideas about ways in which I could be even more useful to you. Not sure if you know this, executive, but I happen to be great at PowerPoint and you have this deck coming up. I'd love to take a shot at that. So I'm advocating coming to the table with your executive with ideas, with maybe 3 ideas about ways to reveal your value that they might not even be thinking about. I have a theory that we put people in boxes, that we size them up, we think we know who they are, and none of us walk around with our resumes on us. So we can't expect our executives to be remembering all the talents and skills you possess. So a meeting that you call is a great way to remind them of who exactly is on the payroll here and what skills might you bring. I'm a big fan of staff bringing those ideas to executives, knowing that they don't have much, chances are they don't have any training in managing people, and therefore staff has a chance to manage them. That's and doing this, to call a meeting like this, builds respect because you're taking a leadership proactive stance on this about your career, that you've given. You can use the phrase, I've given this a lot of thought and I'd like to discuss this with you about my future at the company. And if you're pitching an idea, assistants often have to pitch an idea. I'd like to have access to your inbox, or I'd like to take on this piece of the project. You could also use the line, could we give this a try? Could we give it a try for a month? Could we give it a try for 3 months? And that builds a respect. It builds a sense of belonging. And then hopefully it could lead to the question, how do you see me earning more money at this company? And might these lead to that, lead to promotion, lead to title change, lead to a change in your job description? Because job description equals money. So it's very fact-based. What you're being hired to do a job, that should be equivalent to compensation. But the clincher in most companies is that a lot of executives and human resource directors don't really understand what you do. Mm-hmm. So there is no negotiating if people in leadership don't understand what you do, and the way to solve that is to put it in writing for them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, at the end of the day, I think all relationships really come down to communication. So, and especially now, I mean, that we're not interacting necessarily in quote person. Could you maybe give an example? And I know I didn't ask you these questions before we got on. So, okay, if you don't have an answer for it, but let's say you need to have a communication reset. Okay. So whether you're struggling with any of the respect, belonging, fair compensation, or career growth, you need to get, back to the basics in terms of how you're actually communicating.
Yep.
Do you have any suggestions for somebody who is looking to have that conversation?
Yeah, this is about specificity, and it varies from person to person. It's not the same. An example, I had a student in our London class who came from one of the, I think Poland, and her first name and her last name were tricky to pronounce, but with practice, you can say any name, right? Her executive intentionally mispronounced her name. And so she felt disrespected and it irked her.
I think they did that. Was that a power thing? Like why intentionally? I'm so.
Oh, he thought it was funny. He thought it was funny. Okay. So, there's a disconnect. He didn't realize, or hopefully he didn't realize rather than didn't care how she was responding to it. But finally, she had a conversation with him to say, I need you to understand that this is offensive to me and that it's really important to me that you pronounce my name right. I mean, after all, there's nothing more important. There's nothing more personal than somebody's name. I give that to you as an example, Claire. It's about specificity, about what it is that's irking you. Because here's the thing, anything that's irking you, whether it's your the fact that they don't say good morning or good evening, or that they interrupt you constantly in a meeting, which is really common. They may be oblivious and clueless. I can tell you for sure that many leaders are oblivious and clueless to the way people are responding to them. And the reason they're staying oblivious and clueless is because nobody's telling them, is that there's fear around being honest about these things. But if it's, I ask, what's your stress level on a scale of 1 to 10? And if it's a 6 or above, if this issue, whatever it is, you know, the name thing, money, whatever it is, if it's causing you that much stress, that also means that it's preoccupying you, and it's eating up time and brain space. I mean, I'm sure everybody on this call is aware of an issue in your life that in the past has preoccupied you. You've lost sleep over it. If any of those things are true, then it's worth addressing with the person who's causing you this problem. And it doesn't have to be, you know, the word confrontation has gotten a bad rap, in my view. I think there's such a thing as positive confrontation. And it's about just having a reset and saying, hey, could we have a virtual coffee for 15 minutes tomorrow? I'm going to put myself on your calendar, and to see, you know, and just say, I need to discuss something with you. You probably don't realize this, but I need to let you know what's troubling me, because I'm thinking about it a lot, and I believe it's hurting our work relationship. Because here's the thing, at work, we don't have to be best friends, but what we do need to be is respectful and professional. And in telling our executive and our coworkers what's bugging us, that builds respect, and it will reset the relationship. It will, you know, will it solve it 100%? Probably not, but it will clear the air. And I can tell you it's a confidence builder, and the relationship will never be the way it was, and it will be changed, and more often than not in a really positive way.
I know this isn't one size fits all, but are there any kind of do's and don'ts when it comes to email communication, phone, Skype, in person? I get asked this a lot around salary negotiations. Should I do it by email, etc.? I mean, I always say, if it's not in writing, it's not happening. But do you begin that way? Probably not. But do you also want to spring this conversation on somebody when they're not quite prepared to have it? Also probably not. So in taking, you know, the scenario of somebody, you know, we need to have a reset conversation about communication, what would be the best way to go about it in terms of how you approach them?
You know, as you say, it's not one size fits all. So it's about the relationship that you have with this person. But in the virtual world, it's become much safer to put things in writing. And you definitely want to sleep on something. You know, one rule of thumb is you don't want to send a ginormously long email, that you want to give like 3 or 5 bullets about what it is that you're wanting to talk about in the meeting that you're scheduling for next week. I think it's human nature. None of us want to be blindsided with new information. So it's useful if the person you're talking to has a heads up and has some idea about what it is you'd like to discuss. It kills me, for example, when, you know, assistants learn that, or just anyone learns that they're being fired, and it's a complete shock. Yeah. It shouldn't be a shock. There should be ongoing conversations. So I believe the email is a buffer. I do not believe in putting anything tricky or anything of the nature of a conflict in a text message, or, you know, a Slack channel. The channel of communication should match the seriousness of the subject and the preferences of the person you're dealing with. You know, that not everybody's an email person. Not everybody, it really just depends on what any given person's preferred method of communication is. And it's important to find that out.
Yeah, very important. If you are, let's pivot to maybe the compensation and the career growth part.
Sure.
if you, and I'll begin with the career growth, you spoke to it already in terms of making suggestions of ways that you can stretch your skills, obviously matched to the need of the person you're working for. But what are other ways that you can demonstrate that it is in their benefit to say yes to you? Because that's the thing, everybody who's watching, whenever you ask for something at work, it's really not about you, it's about how it's going to ultimately impact the business bottom line. So in this scenario, yeah, what if you're like, I want to take a class, go to a conference, maybe take on a new role. Maybe let's do a little bit of a role play of like, what is the best way to position, how do I position this to get that yes? And if it's not a yes immediately, how do I have the confidence to ask again later?
Well, Claire, I'm so glad I remembered to say this. A leader actually said to me pre-pandemic, he said, I don't say yes the first time that one of my staffers asks me for training. I wait until they ask a second time because that tells me they really want it. How about that?
Yes.
Not take no for an answer. That was really important information that he gave me insight into that. I don't say yes the first time. But for everyone on this call, this is about demonstrating what's in it for them if they say yes for you. What's in it for them? And it's about making your business case. Clearly, I know assistants who have been supported to get their MBA degrees to the tune of $86,000 by their company because it was relevant to her role. And it's about proving relevance. So Claire, I have an idea that to take this class, and I've printed out all of the information for you to take a look at and why this would relate to the role I'm doing right now. This is the cost, and was hoping that the company could pay for this. And then it's a discussion. The trend that is happening right now is that recruiters are building in annual training budgets into the compensation package. So you're getting salary, you're getting perhaps bonus, hopefully, vacation time, and you're getting an annual training budget from which to attend training. So less and less people are having to fight for training dollars, that companies are getting on, company leaders are onto it, that one of the key ways of having retention is to offer it and not make people fight for it. Like that executive who I want them to ask twice. Like, really, why are we playing these games? It feels so juvenile, frankly. For in the assistant world, $5,000 a year is about the average that an annual training budget. And it's not to say that assistants don't have to make their case for that. They still have to say what they want to spend the money on. What do they want to take? What do they want to do? But absolutely true story that one of our students during the pandemic was slower at work. So she decided to get her Outlook certification, email. And when she came back, she was so excited about it. She said, why don't I do a lunch and learn, and I'll teach the other assistants a few things, the 30 minutes. And the CEO said to her, well, that's a great idea, but the whole company uses Outlook. So why don't you just invite everybody?
Wow.
Which 400 people, 150 people showed up at that lunch and learn. They were so excited. She's continued to do trainings. In 2021, she was named Employee of the Year.
Wow.
And what's cool about that, it's very cool on its surface, but it's a peer, employees voted on it. The employees were the ones to nominate. And it's the first time in the company's history that an executive assistant won the award. And she attributes it to those trainings that she did. So on an ROI, holy cow.
Yeah.
The few $100s that it cost to send her for certification in Outlook ended up being able to, if each of those people were able to save 30 minutes a week, that has a serious monetary value to the bottom line, right? Would you agree?
I want to know the ROI on her salary also, because that is the other thing for everybody watching. Anytime that you move forward, whether it is you getting a training, going to a conference, leading something, writing a blog. I mean, if she couldn't lead the workshop, maybe she could have written a blog post.
Yep.
Integrate that into the conversation that you have about your promotion and raise, because you are moving the needle for the company. You just are. Even being a
Absolutely.
mentor, and it doesn't need to be official. Being a mentor, I mean, you're helping another person gain confidence, which means they're more committed and productive. And all of that is the bottom line. So speaking of the bottom line, let's maybe transition now into a conversation about compensation. And I know at Ladies Get Paid, that's a specialty of ours. We've got tons of classes and salary negotiations. So that's
Yeah.
not going to be a huge focus of the rest of our conversation today, but that is obviously, a big reason why people leave if they're not getting the money that they want. So let's talk about, maybe as the employee, how do you bring up wanting a raise? And then we'll talk about closing the wage gap in companies. So again, for everybody watching, I still want to get a sense of if you're looking for tips as somebody who needs to influence up so that you can stay, or if you're somebody who is in charge of or can more easily influence the environment to get folks to continue, to stay, the retention piece. But yeah, so I need a raise. I want a raise. How do I bring it up?
Okay.
So where do we begin?
This is about the step one is doing your research. So important it's impossible to negotiate for more money if you don't know what market value is for the role in general in your geographic market. There are some recruiters out there who say it shouldn't matter what geographic market you're in. A job is a job is a job. And if you're doing it in St. Louis, it should make the same amount of money as if you're doing it in New York City. But as of this minute in 2022, that's not the way it is. So it's about going to those websites, salary.com, comparably.com, indeed.com, glassdoor.com. Many sites have salaries associated with job titles. Now it's not a black and white situation because you have to add in your experience and your skills and education, certifications, et cetera. So it's a combination of, it's so vital though to do your research and have some idea. A local recruiter should be able to help you name the range of where you should be with this many years experience. And for this job title, this is what you should be making. And so that will help you benchmark it, because lots of companies have salary bands and salary caps and all of this jargon. And many companies are sitting with obsolete salary bands and salary caps. And many people are sitting with obsolete job descriptions as well. So step one is the research on finding out what market value is. You could talk to colleagues in a similar industry, in the same city. There are many ways to find the research to find out the number. Then it's about creating your job description, your resume, which outlines in detail, all of your education, every skill, every responsibility, the things that you know how to do that you are doing. And these are quantifiable facts in writing. And that's going to be your ammunition. What I have found, Claire, is that one of the reasons why women in general do not do a great job of advocating and negotiating for themselves is because they have trouble saying the words. It's a hard sentence to say. I believe what I'm doing is worth $15,000 more than I'm making right now. That's a tough thing to say. So the documents that you're creating do the talking for you. And that's the point. So that you can then create a cover letter and set up a meeting that's going to happen 7 to 10 days out that you plan. And cover letter to your executive can essentially say, I'm excited about my work at the company and with you. And I've put together these materials to share my research and to share just refamiliarize you with my resume and my job description so that we can discuss compensation for the next year. And my research shows that this is the number that I'm shooting for. This is what the role is worth. And then that opens the door to the conversation.
Yeah.
So it still might be a negotiating thing, but many leaders are happy to have this data because they don't have it in their head. They need the data, and you're the one who can provide it.
And I think a through line to what I've been hearing from you is we have to continually communicate what we do to the people that we work with and for, because they're busy and things are moving quickly.
Right.
So I think, and tracking it is also very important. And I think anytime that anybody has a win, whether it's great feedback that you receive or,
Yes.
forward it, like just make sure, and it's not bragging, it's reassuring them that they're actually doing a great job because your success is their success, right?
Absolutely.
So this is a benefit to everybody. Well, I realize we only have about 10 minutes left. So talking about kind of closing the wage gap in companies, right? Something that you have mentioned before is asking for a salary evaluation and also choosing companies that embrace pay transparency and pay equity. So what is a salary evaluation? Although I guess we all have a sense. What actually is a salary evaluation though, right? Like on its face, I know what it is, but like what goes into it? Is it expensive to do? And if so, do I have to, make the case for budget to my company to actually go through with this kind of evaluation?
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. In HR, in the human resources department, it is legal to ask for a salary evaluation. However, many in real life assistants in my workshops report that not all HR departments are forthcoming with salary information from internally in the company. And it's many big companies pay outside companies for survey data. They're called job families. So they'll buy surveys for executive assistants or for vice presidents in marketing. Those are considered job families. HR has this data, but they're not all, it's not equal about how forthcoming they are with this information. The Great Resignation, Claire, has created, we've gone from the subject of money going from the big secret and this taboo, forbidden subject to one where HR is more willing to share information about where you stand in the company. A lot of companies have, salary bands and levels, and I'm a level 12. And how do I get to be a level 15? Well, you have to do, this is the definition of the level 15. And that information is not on the website, and it's not voluntarily given. But I am advocating for all staff, if money is this issue, to go to HR and respectfully ask for this pay evaluation for where you stand. This is your career we're talking about, your livelihood. You have a right to understand the career progression at your company. And it's logical to ask the question, well, I'm sitting at a level 10. I'm just making this stuff up, of course. I'm at a level 10. What is it that I need to do to get to a level 12? Is it education? Is it, numbers of people I'm working with in my department? What is it? It shouldn't be a secret anymore. And because of the Great Resignation and HR and leaders wanting to hold on to people more, they are more apt to respond positively to that request. And it doesn't cost the employee anything. You could do your outside research, though, so that you can compare it to what you learn from inside the company.
Yeah, I think if there was ever a time to do it, I mean, the power, and apologies, I think there's a helicopter going on. I think, the power is with the employee more so than I think ever really before, which it's interesting. I'm finding, so statistically, it's within our power, right? There are more job openings
Yes.
than ever, in many, many years. Okay. But then this is the part where I find very interesting. I think emotionally, how many people feel about their power in the workplace is not necessarily aligned with the data, in the sense of many of us still feel quite traumatized by the instability that happened during the pandemic or is still happening, inflation, right? So they may, see that there are job openings, but feel like they're not secure. So it's interesting. So have faith, guys, that like data doesn't lie. The jobs are out there. You have more power than ever before to speak up and stand up. And again, you can position and should position everything as a benefit to them, because the data also supports that when there is inclusivity, right, when there's diversity at companies, when people are paid commensurate with their value, they stay longer, they do better. And that actually saves the company money in the long run.
Absolutely. It's so expensive to replace staff.
Yes.
It would boggle Olympias in my mind that why do you painstakingly hire people in the first place only to abuse them and chase them away?
Right.
It's like that's just simply not logical. So something else is in play. My hope, Claire, is that events like this, the podcasts that are out there, are confidence building to give women the courage to try to put it in writing. There is something very confidence building by putting that job description in writing and to be able to look at it and say, you know what? I do everything on this list. This is major and it's going on for 4 pages. There are many people saying, I'm doing like 2.5 jobs here. And I say back, well, then I suspect you're not making 2.5 salaries.
Right, right.
So there's a lot of being taken advantage of out there. And we need to correct that.
Yes. Last 5 minutes. So only 5 minutes more for everybody who's watching, who has their own questions. Speaking of questions, here are some ones that were submitted. Okay. Many people are quitting their jobs, not just due to compensation, but also because they are being mandated to return to their offices. What are your thoughts on this? And what measures should companies take to retain staff that would prefer to work remotely?
Right. Compromise. The word is compromise, that it's many companies have adopted the work from anywhere policy. It's not always possible in every company to allow people to work from home. And it's a challenge for leaders to manage a workforce that's partially in the office and partially at home. You can understand that if you put yourself in your leader's shoes, you can see how that would feel very fragmented. But yet, leaders need to go to each staffer to find out one-on-one, to find out what's important to them. Is it the flexibility? Is it the hours? What is it? Because it's not the same for everyone. And that's what the best leaders are doing right now, is looking at their staff with fresh eyes and compromising and going to the staff to figure out what is the fix, to hold on to what they're referring to as high value employees.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Another question that was submitted is, how do we get leadership in the company to take talent drain seriously and actually start to investigate the underlying causes people are leaving? And again, I want to always disclose, this is not, nothing's one size fits all. Your advice is just your advice, filter it through your personal experience. But I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, I shared earlier that it is very common for staff to protect the leader and not necessarily tell them the truth. And therefore, leaders have said to me, Bonnie, if no one's telling me there's a problem, I don't think there is one. And so therefore, my answer to your question about how do they take the talent drain seriously is people have to gain the courage and the gumption to be honest about the pain, about pain and itch, the metaphorical pain and itch, and sometimes literal, about what is wrong with what's happening at the company. Can we pay attention to the revolving door that's happening in marketing, for example, and how much money it's costing to replace those people? What I see is a disconnect between what's really happening and what leaders know is true. I don't think they all have a clear idea of what's really happening. And until we can be honest with them, it's not going to change.
Not sure if you have an answer to this one, but just something I'm thinking about is we always say, don't be the only one to go in, right? And make sure you have white men as allies, you know, and whatever you're going to advocate for. But
Yeah.
how do you do this in a way where you're not, I guess, bombarding them, or, you know, it's like a whole 10 of you all marching in there? I don't know if you have any advice around.
Yeah, I do actually. You know, it's very easy for leaders to dismiss one person. Really easy. Not so easy to dismiss five. And so it's in the approach, and it's different for women than men, because we as women, there is a double standard, and we need to be really careful about the approach to not come, you know, we're trying to be assertive and we get accused of being aggressive and the B word, blah, blah, blah. We know that's true. So it's about showing respect. And there are a lot of ERG groups happening at offices, employee resource groups, and those groups are being instrumental in bringing concerns to leaders who are listening. They're finally listening. If there's any message I want to share tonight, it's that right now in 2022, I think we have a golden opportunity right now. Now's the time. There has been so much volatility, so much movement in this workplace. This is the time to fix what's broken, finally, to be honest with our leaders about what's broken, these toxic work environments, the wage gap. This is it. I really hope we don't squander this opportunity in the aftermath of the pandemic and somehow a year from now find ourselves trying to recreate 2020. Like, that's just not going to happen. So I think that's going to require everyone to stand up and have a voice here.
Amazing. Fantastic. I know that you have a new book coming out, but tell us kind of what's next, how we can get involved, and then I'll just do a final closeout for Ladies Get Paid. But Bonnie, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you and your work.
This time has flown, boy. My website is bonnielowkramen.com. The resources I create, the workshops that I do for assistants, the trainings that I do inside corporations are all designed to build an ultimate workplace, that we want to build a better workplace. I suspect many of you on this call are parents and maybe even grandparents, and I'm both a mom and a grandmother. My goal with everything I'm doing is to build a workplace that's going to be better for these kids, for our children, for our grandchildren, so that when they get to be in the workplace, that they're paid properly, that they're not bullied, that they're not sexually harassed. And, you know, are we going to be able to eliminate all of that? Probably not. But I want it to be less. And I just know that we can, if we shine a light. And that's what the book is about. It's about shining a light on what's really going on and what's going unsaid in this workplace. Because while people are not saying these things to leaders, for whatever reason, they're talking to me. And I'm about to blow the lid off it all.
Yes. Yes. Love it. There's a reason that we connected. So thank you, Bonnie. Thank you to everybody who's watching. Come join the Ladies Get Paid Network. If you're not already part of it, it is free, ladiesgetpaid.com. We've got over 55,000 people who are sharing resources and advice and stories. We do webinars every week. We have a conference coming up, virtual, free, on May 24th. It's getmoney-getpaid.com, but it's also all on the website. And also the Ladies Get Paid books, ladiesgetpaidbook.com/book. And without further ado, thank you to all for being here. And thank you to Bonnie. And I can't wait for everybody to stay in touch and keep us updated that you've done some of the things or all of the things that were talked about today. So follow me on Instagram at Claire Gets Paid. Feel free to message me or post about your journey. I'll repost you because I know there's going to be folks here who are making some real, big changes in their life because of what you shared, Bonnie. So thank you.
Oh, so glad. Link in with me, please. Claire, thank you so much for the important work you're doing. You really are doing a great job.
Thanks all. Have a great rest of your night.